This, what I put in front of you, is what's called, it's a rough summary of one verse. It's a rough summary of one verse. It's called Ayat Kursi, the verse of the throne. It talks about God's attributes. It's made up of 9 sentences. One verse made up of how many? 9 sentences. I'll stay with it. The first sentence is Allahu la ilaha illa huwa al-hayyul qayyum. God, there's no one to be worshipped or obeyed in any way, shape, or form except He. He is the living, the maintainer, al-qayyum. He maintains all things. Nothing stays intact until He keeps it intact. That's the first sentence. That first sentence mentions 2 attributes of God. The first of them is the living, and the second, the maintainer. The second sentence says, لَا تَأْخُذُهُ سِنَةٌ وَلَا نَوْمٌ. Drowsiness does not get a hold of Him, neither does sleep. Now, drowsiness meaning the stage before sleep. Sleep and soon to follow, right? Like the thing you feel when you're sitting in a classroom. Drowsiness, and then comes the sleep, right? Then he says, لَهُ مَا فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ. That's second sentence. If you're not clear about a sentence, let me know. Third sentence, لَهُ مَا فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَمَا فِي الْأَرْضِ, means He owns all that is in the skies and the earth. I summarize that as owns all. Okay? He owns whatever lies in the skies and the earth. Fourth sentence, مَنْ ذَا الَّذِي يَشْفَعُ عِنْدَهُ إِلَّا بِإِذْنِهِ. Who will make intercession? I'll explain the word intercession, because I didn't get it the first time I read it in translation. So I'm guessing some of you won't get it either. Who will intercede on His behalf except by His permission? What that means is, when you get in trouble at your job, and you're about to be fired, but the manager's your uncle, and so he steps in between the CEO and you and says, hey, it's my nephew. Just give him one more chance. Just go easy on him. He just interceded. He interceded. You were about to get in trouble. You had a good hookup, who was your uncle, and he helped you out there. Okay? Or you just got pulled over. Police officer shows up at the window, and you're trying to get out of a ticket. You say, nice hat, officer. Didn't work. And then you're taking out your license, and yo, by the way, my brother is a cop. Oh yeah? What precinct? Oh, I know Frank. Okay, just be careful, all right? That little ID card from Frank interceded. You understand? When you use someone to kind of get you out of trouble, that's intercession. He says, who dare intercede before God except the one He gives permission to intercede? Nobody's going to come and say, hey, Lord, oh Lord, I know about throw him in hell. Hold on there. He's with me. Not going to happen. Unless He will allow that to happen. Except by His permission. Okay. So He mentions something that won't happen, but mentions a small exception. And we don't know what that exception means yet. It just says that, except by His permission. That's all He says. That's your fourth sentence. The fifth sentence is, He knows what lies ahead of them, meaning what's in their future. وَمَا خَلْفَهُمْ, and whatever's behind them, meaning their what? Past. He knows their future, He knows their past. Then He says, وَلَا يُحِيطُونَ بِشَيْءٍ مِنْ عِلْمِهِ إِلَّا بِمَا شَاءَ. And they encompass nothing of His knowledge, except what He lets them know. He knows all, we know nothing, and whatever we know is because He lets us know. So what we know is the exception. The little that He let us know. إِلَّا بِمَا شَاءَ. Okay. Then He says, وَسِعَ كُرْسِيُّهُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. His magnificent throne expands the entire skies and the earth, meaning all existence is actually under His kingdom, His throne. Now a throne is a very small part of a castle. It's the innermost part of a castle. The throne is small. You can have a larger, more grand throne, but still it's a very small architectural piece inside the castle. God says His throne itself is the span of the universe. The throne. Well, to speak of the castle. That's what he's describing His magnificent glory here. In any case, then He says, وَلَا يَؤُودُهُ حِفْظُهُمَا. Guarding the skies. Guarding the skies and guarding the earth. Guarding the heavens and the earth doesn't exhaust Him. Now, the idea of exhaustion is associated with protection. What do you find security guards doing in action movies all the time? That's how you build a piece. Pass through security, huh? Security guard falls asleep. When you're guarding, your tendency to fall asleep. He says guarding the skies and the earth does not put Him to, or doesn't exhaust Him. Then He says, وَهُوَ الْعَلِيُّ الْعَظِيمُ. And He is the All-High, the Great. That's the last sentence. Are they 9? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9? Everybody see 9 sentences? Here's what's cool about this. The first sentence had 2 attributes of God. The 9th sentence has two attributes of God. You see that? The second sentence says, he doesn't get hit with drowsiness or sleep. And drowsiness and sleep are directly associated with what? Eighth sentence. What is that? Exhaustion. The third sentence says, he owns everything. And the third last sentence says, his throne extends to everything. The fourth sentence says, nobody will make a case in front of him except, and here's the exception, if he gives permission. The fourth last sentence says, what does it say? They know nothing except what he lets them know. A sentence about exception here, a sentence about exception there. And the middle sentence conveniently says, he knows everything that lies ahead, and what lies behind. It's actually even almost in a literary sense, he knows the sentences that are coming and what were already mentioned. They're symmetrical. This is not an isolated incident in the Qur'an. There are hundreds and hundreds of examples of literary nuance in the Qur'an like this. And this is just one aspect of Qur'an's literary nuance. I want to give you another. This is an oral tradition, as I mentioned before. And in an oral tradition, when something gets memorized, you don't change its order. You just say it like it is. You repeat it hundreds of times. So there is no time for an editorial process. There's no time. One of my favorite declarations in the Qur'an is وَرَبَّكَ فَكَبِّرْ. Roughly translated, declare the greatness only of your master. Tahleel, can you write that for me in Arabic on the screen? Separated letters, please. You know what I'm going to do, right? So while you're doing that, I'll go to something else for a little bit.
What do you want?
I'll tell you. Just erase this. The Qur'an, for example, I'll give you another really neat example of how the Qur'an's organized. You have in the Qur'an several stories. One of my favorite stories is the story of Joseph. Story of Joseph. And that's the 12th surah of the Qur'an is dedicated to the story of Joseph. Okay?
You want this in Arabic?
Oh yeah. Oh, let me try it. Okay. Don't you erase that? I'm tempted. You can erase everything else.
You forgot a cough.
One bad marker.
Ustad, you forgot a cough after the cough.
Yeah, got it. Okay. God. And let me fix this now. Okay. I know it's really hard to see, but I'll try and explain this to you anyway. Then I'll come back to the story of Joseph. It says, oh, thank you. That's great. Declare the greatness only of your master. Declare the greatness only of your master is what the verse says. It's one among many verses. It's a part of a conversation. So it's like I'm taking one sentence out of a passage, really, right? But it's a beautiful declaration. Declare the greatness only of your master. Nothing else is worthy of having its greatness declared like your Lord does. The cool thing about this is, even if you don't know how to read Arabic, I wrote this. This is actually separated letters. Arabic letters are written connected. When I actually block lettered them, I separated them out to make a point to all of you. You see that first shape over there? That's like the letter R to them in the word Rabb. It's the first letter of the verse, or of the sentence, at least in the verse. What's the last letter? You see a similar shape? Then there's two boats with dots at the bottom. Notice the end? Two boats with dots at the bottom. Then there's this weird Superman thing. And skip a letter and there's another weird Superman thing. The sentence itself is what's called a palindrome. A palindrome in English is Bob. Race car.
Anna.
Huh?
Anna.
Anna. Those are palindromes. Now when you want to make a palindrome, what do you have to take into consideration? Tell me. You want to make a palindrome in English. What do you have to consider? I will wait. I love letting good things get off of it. It's a thing I do. Get off of it.
Has to be spelled the same way.
So you want to consider spelling. Because when we speak, typically we consider our content. What are you going to talk about? But in a palindrome, you have to compromise your content and you have to concern yourself with your spelling. And once you concern yourself with spelling, you have to compromise your content. It's no longer going to come out in what you wanted to say, because now you're more concerned about how it sounds. That's what your primary concern is. So when we do come up with palindromes in the English language, clearly meaning, function, communication is not, thank you. That's not at our forefront. We're not thinking about that. The declaration is, declare the greatness only of your master. Is that a meaningful statement? Is that meaningful? Yeah. And it's actually within a passage. It's not a separate sentence and the Prophet comes out and says, hey, look at this. By the way, he can't even do that. Because he doesn't know how to what? Read. And to be able to say, look at the letters, you'd have to know the letters. He doesn't know the letters. He just says it. He just says it. And so we have, and this kind of thing was discovered like centuries after the Qur'an was put in print form. Like, oh, look at that. Oh, look at this. Look at this symmetry over here. Look at that symmetry over there. Look at this passage's symmetry. And I told you the story of Joseph, right? I was mentioning something about the story of Joseph. The story of Joseph, beautiful story. It's just absolutely fascinating in the Qur'an. 12th surah. It is in 12 parts. The story of Joseph is in 12 parts. The first 6 parts create a problem. The next 6 parts in reverse order solve the problem. The first part is he saw a dream. The last part is his dream gets interpreted. And everything works its way towards the middle in an oral tradition. That's what I mean when I say, and symmetry is just one thing I wanted to highlight today. Symmetry is just one of those things that people just don't know about the Qur'an. It gets lost in translation, or people like, who would want to study the Qur'an as literature? But this stuff fascinates me. Oh boy, I get just blown away by this stuff. I'll give you an example of something that doesn't have to do with symmetry. It has to do with how nuanced the language of the Qur'an is, and how sometimes in translation stuff's missing. Okay. You guys know the story of Moses.